Okay, we are here for our endorsement interview for House District 43. I know that's Northeast Portland because it's my district.
Oh.
And today we have two candidates. I'm going to ask you both to introduce yourselves, describe the district, and tell us why you're the best person for the job. If you've done this before, you'll know it's not a debate, but you can feel free to respond to one another. You don't get equal time necessarily, but we strive to be fair. So why don't we start with you, Representative Sanchez, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Tana Sanchez. I'm the state representative for House District 43. I won my first election, of course, in 2016, and have held since then. I've been, of course, in Judiciary. I was the chair of that committee for a little bit, chair of Human Services for a little bit, and then, of course, last year, Behavioral Health, and now, of course, the co-chair of Ways and Means on the House side. My district, of course, is, as you said, North and Northeast Portland, sort of that corner of I-5 and 84. It's going to change a little bit, of course, with redistricting. I lost Cully, which is a real big bummer. But I gained a little bit from 24th up to 33rd on the 84 side. Lost a little bit of, it doesn't go all the way up to Lombard now on the I-5 side. It goes up to Killingsworth, I believe, and then makes a weird little jog and back out to Lombard a little further on. So
is it everything east? You have nothing west of 5?
I don't think so.
Okay.
In the final run, I don't think so. I think I lost Overlook as well.
I think the one little piece of the 5 would be down by the river, down by the convention center and such. That little tiny industrial dot down there.
So.
Yeah, this redistricting makes it complicated too.
Well, we had it easy in our spot.
Wasn't it different?
Well, I think losing Cully is a big difference.
Yeah.
I think it's a huge difference. That is one of the more low-income parts of the district. So in terms of like describing the district used to be, when I grew up there, mostly low-income, mostly people of color, and that's changed a lot. The demographics have changed significantly. Needless to say, Lloyd Center used to be this big bustling thing, and now it's like contracting quite a bit. Just had a conversation with folks about what do you want to happen to Lloyd Center? Oh gosh. So, we're losing some really great things that, some really great things about the community, and we're growing also really amazing things about the community. Williams in Vancouver has changed so very much. I used to live right next to Jefferson High School, and that was just a struggling area at one point, and now obviously quite huge. Lots of new buildings, lots of new housing, unfortunately some really high-end housing, but things have changed quite a bit in the district. Yeah.
Okay, Tim?
Yes, sir.
A little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Tim Lemaster. I moved here to Oregon 9 years ago. After retiring out of the Marine Corps, spent 22 years in the Marine Corps, enlisted back in the days of private when the Gulf War was raring up. They were in the process of ordering 100,000 body bags. My mom wasn't too happy about my signing up. And so came in enlisted, was a combat camera photographer, and worked my way up through the ranks, became a warrant officer, retired as a major, whole time working through as photo, video, graphic production, that kind of thing. Traveled the whole time, all over the world, literally circumnavigating the world. As a single guy, it made it easy for them to just bounce me around. I rarely lived in a place more than 2 years at a time until the very tail end of my career. And then, I was stationed in Hawaii, my twilight tour as we call it, and it's a melting pot there of people from all over, and people visiting from the Northwest, people visiting from Portland, friends of mine in Hawaii that were from the Northwest and such. I'd never been up this way. The furthest north I'd been before traveling here was San Francisco, really. And so when I retired, did a nice road trip, stopped here, was going to be just kind of a week stay, and turned into about a month. A good bit of time meeting people, and folks were putting me up. Came back at the end of that particular summer, 2013, and and got into school, used my GI Bill to finish up getting my degree, took classes at the community college, PCC there at Killingsworth, and supplemented that with online courses from my basically home state, Colorado. And I just kind of do the home state because as a kid I bounced around. My mom was a single parent with me and my sister pretty much my entire life, raising the two of us on, fast food wages and waitressing and that kind of thing until the later part of her life. And then, settled here basically 9 years ago, bought my house up near Rosa Parks and MLK, up in that area. Bought my house 7 years ago and just kind of been low-key enjoying my life as a retired person. Rent rooms in my house, long-term rentals, to help pay the bills, a little extra money and such. And up until recently, and really to the late part of my life, I never really paid attention to local politics because it really didn't affect me being military. And as much as I moved, a lot of military people, when they get families, they tend to live in one area for extended times, and then things matter to them more. But for me, I moved around all the time, so it's all national, international, and then after being here for 9 years. Especially the last couple years with all the dynamics of, especially 2020, the riots and protests and everything, really had me paying more attention to what's going on locally. More so during that, because the police station that's getting lit on fire, night after night is 5-6 blocks from my house. The park where the Black Bloc protesters and folks would rally is, 8 blocks from my house. And they go after the police association down the other end of the street, essentially. And and just watching the chaos of all that, got me wondering, like, where's our leaders in this? Why is this so chaotic? And woke me up more to the importance of local politics and getting involved. And then fast forward, the COVID lockdowns and everything going on, get into recently, towards the end of last year, the politics and the year starts coming around for political stuff, and I'm around people, and a lady approached me. They had a matrix. Hey, here's all the seats that we have that we're looking for people to run, Republicans.
Who was that?
Lady named Janet.
Who was?
She just out of Clackamas, just active in the Republican conservative realm down in that area.
Kind of recruiting.
A lot of just grassroots. I mean, just not with any organization.
How'd you find you?
I was just going around. Was going down to Clackamas. I had friends down that way that were talking about, well, hey, there's conservative, Republican, social folks getting together. You don't have that up here for really obvious reasons. Hell, her friend tried organizing just meeting with a coffee with a cop, and they smashed up the coffee store. So, and I hear that even locally. People are shocked as a Republican when I knock on the door. They really are. Political violence is a real thing here. People are scared to put signs in their yards. So you only see and hear one thing going on out here.
You know what? I'm sorry. I don't think that's really related to that political violence. That is not that's not what's happening there. It
Okay.
is to a degree, but I don't think that's Republican or Democrat. I think
No, it's
that's
not.
An attitude of people who obviously don't feel like they should be held accountable for something. They don't like something and they respond in an inappropriate manner. That's what that was.
Well, sure, but
Are we talking about Bison?
Yes.
Yeah, but the
Okay.
politics behind it is come meet a police officer. We have lawlessness here. And that is, I'm hearing it from people. I talked to, I actually met, there was the stabbing in, was it Irvington a couple weeks ago? I happened to meet the couple. The gentleman, he said he called it in. He literally listened to someone get murdered outside of his house, blocks from Blumenauer's home.
You're talking about that incident in Irvington?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was pure luck. I'm just out walking and talking to people, and I come across a couple, and the gentleman, they bought their house there 5 years ago thinking this is a nice, good neighborhood, and they're planning on leaving. The wife, she's been in Portland 20 years, and they're not, she's like, I'm not going to have my kids in this, and they thought Irvington would be safe. A gentleman I met with a restaurant up near the campus, the PCC, somebody walked right out the door with his cash register.
Yeah.
And he calls the cops and there's no response at the end of the day. Talk to businesses on Broadway, same thing. People just come in, walk out the door, and no response. And it's understandable. The police are, simply not there. I mean, there's just the information recently, 1.2 cops per 1,000. And if you kind of do the math on that, I mean, you got 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week, that.
So, I mean, this is a good segue. Like, what would you do if you were elected? How would you help solve that problem?
Well, the police one, in my mind, as far as I understand, a little bit stuffy. I don't have that big political experience, and you've got your different levels, and there's a little bit for me to still kind of understand and grow with that. But a couple straightforward ideas that I've heard and understand is just one, help the state help provide funding for recruiting efforts. I mean, that's a very material thing. Look at how we can provide support to the academy to help get a surge of people through for policing, because I understand that's a bottleneck there as far as the training process and the capacity. So those are some pretty, nitty-gritty common sense items. There's the art of the what if, and again, this would be talk to people, but, is there the potential? But a core problem to this, and this is something to me that I don't think anybody's really talked about, and I bring this from my military experience. Okay, your law enforcement, they got to have that political leader backing them. They got to have the backing of their political leaders. And in 2020, that evaporated. And I met a gentleman who's a firefighter, retired firefighter, in my neighborhood. He filled me in that I guess part of the problem is there was this big bubble of police and stuff that had been hired back in the 80s, retirement eligible, and here they are looking at their politicians next to the all cops are bastard signs as opposed to in between the all cops are bastard signs. And I can tell you from a military perspective, I mean, there's a similarity there. You're only as connected, I guess, or valid as your political leadership empowers you. And so when we have political leaders that didn't strongly stand up and say, hey, look, this abolish the police, abolish prisons, all cops are bastards, defund the police. Sure, we need to be smarter and take a look, and by no means is taking care of the police mean let bad cops roam, because that's a disservice to the good cops. It really
I get
is.
where you are. Will you address, do you think we're under-policed?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
By how much, or how bad is it?
It's pretty darn bad.
Okay.
I couldn't give you the numbers off the top of my head because that's not something I was thinking about necessarily. But I will tell you, we do in fact put more resources into, DPSST and all of the, building, having that ability to have more cops roll through.
Define
It's
DPSST for-
Department of Public Safety Standards and Training.
I do have a question on that.
Wait, hold on. Let her.
Oh, sorry. You're right. Yeah.
And then. Sorry.
And so, yes, that is, I mean, I've been there, talk with folks, recognize how much it takes to actually get those folks through the process, how much it takes actual counties to hire somebody and then have to wait for a while to get them through that process because of how long it takes to get them through. We want cops to go through that process. We need them to go through that process, obviously, to be hired and, to work in the different parts of the state. It's just a very long process, and it's very, very expensive. And we have not pulled back on that at all. As a matter of fact, have continued to add more resources to it, if I recall correctly. I mean, it's not being done. It's simply not going to be able to be done fast enough. It takes quite a long time to make it happen.
So
Sorry.
why? I mean, I understand that, but also my understanding of how they were going to add more classes to the academy was like an emergency measure. I mean, I don't understand why it has to be an emergency. Like, why wasn't the state aware? It seems like the state should have easily been aware of this problem.
I think the state is aware, and certainly since I've been in office, we've been talking about it and trying to get, more things to happen there. Part of the problem, I think, is again because of a lot of new training and different things people want to be added to training. It takes more time to make that happen, right? And I think that certainly it was mentioned the retirement age. That a lot of folks, it's okay, we're at retirement age. We knew that was going to happen. Obviously, we planned for that. And it just happened, unfortunately, we were at this weird pivotal moment in time where a lot of things shifted all at once and happened really, really quickly.
Do you think our political leaders let us down in terms of their support for law enforcement, or their,
I don't think, well, okay, so let me just say, I think there's a distinct difference between county leadership, city leadership, state leadership. There are distinct differences
Sure.
and distinct responsibilities, correct? Right? So did a lot of legislators not get up and say different things that they probably could or should have? Maybe, but they're also sort of going, that's actually a city situation and should have been a city situation to really try to change that. But we were also at a very pivotal moment with the death of George Floyd and the sort of backup, people looking at all of the deaths and recognizing that those, like it or not, we did have bad cops in the world. And that some of them, over and over again, were not being held accountable for their actions. That caused this bizarre sort of cascade of situations to occur. And so, I think they maybe felt like they were in a rock and a hard place. I'm not sure. I didn't have a conversation with any of them about it, so I can't really tell you what they might have been thinking or why they might not have pushed back as much as they could have or should have. I am not thrilled at all with the lack of response from police, because in my real life job that pays the bills, I manage a domestic violence program, right? And I want police to respond to a domestic violence issue when it gets, when people call, that means they're calling for a reason.
Why do you think they're not responding in the way you'd like?
I think because they are overwhelmed with the amount of things that are going on right now. We are overwhelmed with the amount and the level of domestic violence that is occurring right now. During and sort of as we sort of edge into post-pandemic, it is massive. It is a massive amount of violence that is occurring in our society, and it is not just because, we've allowed things to happen. It is because people are stressed out. They have huge tension and anxiety, and we have, and as maybe many times you've probably heard me say, we have disinvested in our behavioral health and addiction systems.
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors.
Yeah, on this notion of politicians and support for police, correct me if I'm wrong, when you joined the Marine Corps, is your allegiance to the Constitution?
That's the oath. That's
Yeah.
the primary
Right.
piece there.
So shouldn't somebody in the military shouldn't that person perform his or her duties with the Constitution in mind, not necessarily the political leaders in mind? And by that same notion, shouldn't police in this city do the job that the police are hired for, which is public safety, regardless of who's in office?
Yeah, but the thing is, I don't know. Okay, I agree. I don't know where you're going with that as a question.
What I'm saying is,
as far as I know, and if there was intentional dereliction, okay, then that certainly needs to be dealt with. I don't know that that was the case or not. I hadn't heard anybody make that argument. An aspect of it is those police are employees, and if they have the option to leave, they have that freedom to do that. Me as a military member, I signed on for my X number of years. As an officer, it's a little different. You just submit your resignation when you're done, essentially. But, during that time, you're obligated, and I imagine the police here, as they were services required, I make the presumption that people do their best, and for the most part, the police were doing what they needed to do. But there's nothing requiring them to stay there. And that's one of the problems I see as being really bad here, again, that I don't really hear a lot of talk on, and what I think is not impressed on people. You can't force someone to be your police. And that's what we're dealing with now. Who in the hell wants to come and be a cop in Portland when the mayor won't even take care of you and have your back? Who's gonna voluntarily come into this situation when this location was national news with hate and discontent targeted at the police, and the political leadership was not there to provide that adult in the room, which is part of their role at all levels. I mean, Ms. Sanchez, made the comment of, well, this is a state and I'm state and that's community. This is my community, and it doesn't go away when I go up to state, and I do think it was very upsetting. She's got a moral position of authority. I mean, she's a leader in the community. Her face is on the side of buses, and she didn't even go talk to the cops to say, hey, what's going on here?
Okay, so do you want to respond to the, sounds like you have one thing, and you respond to that, and...
So when I was referring to the state and the city and the county, I was referring to the leadership that addressed them directly in terms of police. And so we're going to show some level of respect in terms of who addresses the cops. It's not my job, unfortunately, to go and tell the cops what to do. I can't officially. I'm not supposed to be telling the cops what to do. Like, I am not the chief of police. I am not, that commander. I'm not that person. So it's chain of command. That should be understandable.
What about this? What about the less procedural kind of leadership?
So many of us have gotten up and
Is
said
Tim
things.
right to say that you should be meeting with the cops, trying to mediate things in the district?
I'm not sure that still is the best option for me. I know that I can get up and say things like I've been saying when my friend's coffee shop got damaged, that it is not okay for people to respond in an inappropriate manner and do things that are illegal because they don't like the fact that she wanted to have coffee with the cops be right there in her shop. That is not an okay response. Those people need to be held accountable. And I agree with the mayor to the greatest extent of the law, because they did something with malice and intent because they were pissed off, and they didn't like what she did. That she wanted to give the community a voice to talk to police. I talk to police all the time. I don't sit and talk to them directly about you need to do your job differently, because again, that's not my job to do that. Or, give them the pats on the back necessarily, although we do all the time. I recognize every day. I have my niece is a cop. I have family who's military. All of this stuff. I know how people struggle with those kinds of things. I get it, but it's not. This is not. I mean, it's a very nuanced situation, I guess.
This question for both of you. What did the Black Lives Matter movement accomplish in your minds?
Not much.
Okay.
I mean, awareness. There's some awareness. I mean, even for myself, I was down there when the tear gas was popping. I went down to I forget the name of the park there off. Was it 12th in Sandy area? The big park over there, International Hall or whatever it is. I forget the name off the top of my head. I mean, so I will say,
protesting or
to a small extent. I mean, there's a piece because I did want to lend my presence because I think there is validity in ensuring that the law enforcement's accountable to us as well. So it was a few layers. I mean, I decided to see for myself. I mean, this is a historic thing. I'm a photographer by trade, my background, and so, to engage and see the visuals, and also to see for myself. I mean, when the riots broke out, I was down there on my personal Facebook feed because I have friends that are super active, and involved, and to hear routinely about the cops are abusing and beating people up, I'm like, okay, well, I want to go see for myself because I don't trust the words on the social medias. And and it's funny, I did a chronological, and I had a touch of riot control, crowd control training in the military life, and I can appreciate the need for law enforcement, etc. And let's say, and at the federal building at least, every time, I think it was 3 times I went down there, every time that it hit the point of tear gas coming out and everything else, I was doing a chronological step-by-step. I had friends saying, well, hey, you're making the protesters look bad. And no, it's because you're getting the real chronology from somebody that's filling in the entire story here step-by-step. And I watched as that fence got compromised, and I'm looking at, I got I got an understanding of what's going on here. As they waited till last minute until the fence was like, oh, this thing is bad, they did their announcements. So it's no surprise that at this point, you're compromising a fence, you're going into a federal facility, You know, people are being blasted. The law enforcement, the feds, are having pyrotechnics lobbed at them, and there's no consideration to this in the big scheme of what the town is talking about, my friends and such. And so I go to see for myself, and to me, everything I saw was an escalation. There was notification. I watched the fence almost go down, and then they said, "Hey, this is it." Boom, boom, boom. Tear gas. And I mean, I watched people, they saw it coming. A lot of people left the park because they knew that it's coming. And so, you know, trying to, you know, in those instances, trying to turn around and say there's all this abuse. I mean, it was a linear process that was very clear and stated. And, you know, if you're going to get involved in that, that's part of what you sign up for.
Did
you know?
agree with the jury verdict that just came out about the police misconduct? I can't remember where it was. I think it was near over. Maybe.
I'm not sure which one you're talking about.
It was the first out of the 2020, that summer, it was the first
Protester
police
got-
misconduct case to go to trial. It was a woman who was there as a medic.
They got slammed to the ground or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
I don't know all the details to that. What I, you know, and so I mean that makes it that kind of makes the point that in a lot of ways I wish I would have been there personally because I don't trust what anybody's saying.
So you don't trust the jury? In that?
Well, you know, there's trusting the jury. I mean, the jury has what it is. I mean, juries make decisions. People agree with them and don't agree with them. You know, I would like to see for myself. I mean, I can understand, appreciate the potential of it being there being merit to what took place, but I don't know for sure on it. I mean, the jury said what they said. Okay, you know, fine. I'm not out there, you know, raising hell over it or anything. Like, all right.
Do you think the Black Lives Matter movement, what did they accomplish?
I think it definitely shone a light on the really, really harsh realities of inequities around communities of color and police response. And that's maybe from a much larger picture. Yeah, that's what it did. It shone that light and really helped people to see that it happens every day, that people of color are treated differently. I mean, I have been stopped many, many times by the police, and you know, every time, except for one time of the many times that I've been stopped by the police, the very first question that gets asked to me as a Native American with feathers and things hanging from my rearview mirror is, "Have you been drinking today?" Every time.
Wow.
And so, you know, I mean, I know the inequities, I get them, you know, so those types of things, that's the reality of the situation. I mean, all of the stuff that happened, yes, most of it not okay, and a lot of disorganization in how those things came down. People experienced what they experienced and responded in ways that were sometimes appropriate and sometimes not, quite clearly. And I'm not happy at all at the damage that's been done to this city. This is my city. I was raised here. This is my city, and I am pissed off about the fact that some people came from lots of different places and made a mess of my city. And I'm not okay with it.
Yeah. Let's turn to legislation. Representative Sanchez, what piece of legislation that you sponsored are you most proud of? And let's say take the last session.
Oh gosh, the last session.
Or I guess we could go back a little further if you want.
Well, I've done a lot of things.
Yeah.
I think to be honest, the piece of legislation that I'm absolutely most proud of at this moment in time is embedding the Indian Child Welfare Act into Oregon statute. So the Indian Child Welfare Act is being attacked on a federal level. The assumption is that it's unconstitutional, which has already been proved that it is not. In fact, it is definitely constitutional, but because somebody doesn't like it, that Native people can hold their children in a different way in the child welfare system and not allow them to necessarily be adopted out to non-Native families, they pushed back and want to take it, you know, to try to damage the act on the, to get rid of it on the federal level. So if that occurs, Native children in the state of Oregon are safe because it is embedded in Oregon statute.
Safe in that they will be...
That the ICWA tenants will apply to their child welfare cases, so that the state of Oregon, DHS, ODHS will be required to do active efforts to return them home if necessary. If they remove them, they will be required to place them with native families, native kith and kin first, other native families, and just make a huge efforts to bring them home to their families and not necessarily adopt them out.
Okay. And that's under a threat at the federal level?
It is.
I just read something about this, I feel like. Is that possible? It's been going on for a while?
It's been going on for a while, that people have been challenging it and trying to have it deemed unconstitutional. But again, here...
On what grounds? That
it's saying that it's by race versus by, I mean, we have treaty rights. We have sovereign treaty rights. These were part of those, that embedding of who we are as Indigenous people. So we are different.
Yeah.
That is the reality of that situation.
Okay. Tim, what if you were elected? What would be the first piece of legislation you would sponsor?
Well, something that really strikes me is looking at something to address the failed education system we have here in Oregon. With what I've seen, I like the general concept of a like voucher or student savings account, something like that. As far as like a giant, I will presumably only have 2 years in office and treat it that way. In all reality, and like in my military life, it's like, 1 or 2 things you accomplish, like that's amazing. So on like a big note, that's something that I think merits a very serious look at for this state. We're literally graduating illiterate adults. I mean, we've got this really low, we actually voted away graduation standards as a response to the failure or the deficiencies that happen and the problems that occurred by shutting down schools through COVID. So if parents...
You're talking about SB, I just was looking at this because I saw it on your website and somebody else mentioned it. It was the Senate bill.
I don't remember the number either. But
last year, yeah.
Yeah.
744.
That's
744. And it right.
So if parents can't rely on the school system to have to have a mark of a standard for their kids to leave with, then why should their kids be trapped in that system? Why should their money go into that?
What's an alternative system that you would prefer?
Well, the voucher school savings, and
But give me an example of where that money, like what's a private school system you think is doing?
So this gets me excited because I think there's a big art of the possible here. Okay. I think, I'm not for comprehensive anything because it just turns into a mess, but it's do it slowly and incrementally. So that to me is one of the things to kind of calm people down about trying something new. The idea is Arizona recently, a couple months ago, passed statewide. They started slow with their special education programs for the state. And the idea is you can only mess with the state money because the feds and all the other have strings that don't allow this. So the state monies that are allocated per student, you essentially open up that, hey parent, you can use 80% or so of that money if you want to remove your child from the public system that they're in because violence, bullying, values, whatever's going on. You can take that money and use it for a different thing. And wide open. To me, I love the art of the possible with wide open. So imagine this. You got people in a neighborhood. I met people that have their homeschooling. So you get a homeschool co-op, they're allowed to have that money. Well, they can pool that money and could literally contract a teacher for themselves. Or if a parent, especially when you're talking the elementary realm, you don't need, a high-level degree for instruction in elementary realm. One of the parents could be a stay-at-home parent being a teacher. And similar to a nursing home, or not a nursing home, child daycare at home type situation, you have your classroom, the neighborhood kids, the parents pool the money, and supplies and whatever can be covered with that. It's a pretty open-ended thing. And my understanding is this is like Arizona has a big wide open on this. And to me, another like art of the possible that actually gets me excited. let's say the pipe fitters union out at Intel. Well, I mean, if you got a bunch of people together that they've got kids, well, they could pool their money, contract, set up. I could imagine Intel saying, well, hey, we got some buildings you can use, and they bring their kids into work. And hell, the pipe fitters union could even support supplying education programs in that. I mean, they know what it takes to grow and succeed as an adult. I mean, they're integral to having math, science. I mean, it's a really technical thing. I mean, just that art of the possible of decentralizing that, empowering people with that money and letting them market. And a friend of mine brought up, said, well, what about the public schools, and it drains out? Well, you know, if they're not succeeding, that's what happens. But you've got these buildings then, I mean, there's a whole art of the possible. They could potentially just, okay, well, we'll lease it out. If it gets drained out, we'll lease out rooms to you homeschoolers or anything else.
So what happens to the kids whose parents don't have enough money to put them in a private school?
So the amount of money we've got allocated per child, from what I understand, that in the budget, is in the neighborhood. There's a little bit I'm not quite sure, because it's a little tough for me to try to dig through these numbers and understand. So I've seen by the time it reaches the child, it's around $5,000 or so. But then I've seen an allocation
Per year?
Yes, but then I've seen another number that said 11,000. So that's a little bit that I'm not quite sure on. But even with children left out, we've got all these nonprofits and such that are very active in people's lives. So nonprofits can be a catalyst to help facilitate that, as all part of it. And as well, I mean, children left in the schools, the children are being left in the schools anyways. It's happening now. I've talked to so many people that have yanked their kids out. I met a grandma that's paying for private school for her granddaughter because of the bullying. The school wouldn't address the bullying that was going on because they can't deal with that. Another person that they support public school, but between the drugs, the bullying, and even some values aspects, like they don't want their kid dealing with social media and the such. The only time they gave their child has access to social media is sitting with grandma. And you've got, and then we always have these battles with, let's say, the religious right and the far left about the different values, things that they're concerned with. Well, how do we decentralize that and they can have that with their values and like-minded and stuff?
You'd have to have a way to enforce standards.
Do you? They just voted away the standards.
No. That is not what that is not what that bill did. That did not vote away standards. That bill removed the requirement for certain testing. Just testing.
And how do you know if a kid is meeting standards?
Hang on, my turn. Right now, what we also know from a lot of research is that continually testing kids does not determine whether or not they're doing well in school. It actually does. Most kids have some level of anxiety around testing and often don't do well. I personally know many children who struggle. They can do math in their class. They do fairly well, but when given a test, when you put a test right in front of them, they freeze up. So that's what this is trying to address, is how difficult it is for kids to do testing and determine whether or not, in fact, they're actually doing anything. We just happened to hit a pandemic right up on top of all of it, which made it even worse. So that's not what that bill was not trying to take away standards at all. It was simply trying to remove what for some kids is a huge barrier.
Was it also, well, I've been reading up on this a bit, and because I had to remember what happened. Isn't there also some concern that, standardized testing favors, white,
it does,
middle class,
it does,
But
kids,
what would you replace
and can
it?
you correct that?
I think there are probably lots of ways to do it. There's a lot of ways to actually look at how different people respond to different things. This is why I personally, as a social worker, right, I have an MSW, I struggle with evidence-based practice because it is only evidenced on one particular population very oftentimes. And if you don't have that evidence that it works with other populations, you then run the risk of putting something on top of another culture or group of people that is not going to fit them and not going to help them, succeed in any way. So it really is about how much more resource can we put into the system to say, this is going to work this way for the kids, whether they're white, black, brown, doesn't matter, that see things this way. And this other resource can be put in for the kids who see it differently. We know very well that we have a wide swath of kids and how they respond to different things. That's amazing right this very moment, because kids are even responding to things differently again because of where they sat with COVID. right? And how they responded, to the level of isolation that they might have experienced, the level of poverty that they might have experienced that they certainly might not have been used to if their parents had been doing well prior to the pandemic. There's lots of different nuanced pieces here, and we have to look at that from a broader perspective and not just this is what it did and this is what it should do.
To both of you, are colleges correct to get rid of the SAT and the ACT for admittance? On that note, because that's the next step, right? Is a lot of colleges during the pandemic said,
I think that
we're done, including...
Yeah. In a way, yes, but I also think that we know that a lot of kids went into college, certainly last year, somewhat unprepared, more emotionally than anything else. And while they may have made it in there because they made it in there however they did, a lot of them were just emotionally unprepared.
So is that an argument? That's not an argument for or against testing, is it? Okay.
I think the SATs were a standard that a lot of kids didn't meet. Again, that anxiety level of just taking a test in the first place, that's really hard. I'm not sure about that piece. I haven't really gotten too deeply into it. But I think that anytime we test people in a way that is sort of like very standard and assume that it fits everybody, that's not always going to work for everybody.
Yeah. Tim?
I don't know much about that specifically. I think what I can say, my own experience, so I went through 2 years of college at Syracuse University for photojournalism and video journalism, and if you don't know, it's considered one of the top, like Ivy League essentially for journalism.
Yeah.
And then of course my bachelor's that I did complete, and I never took an SAT or anything like that. And so I would say that, colleges can figure out what they need to know and what works best for them. I arguably, I will say to an extent, the testing there is, just education. It is really, when you really try to think about how to measure and do all that, there is. I was a kid, it was embarrassing when I was getting ready for college to dig up my high school transcripts. There were some colleges that wanted that, and it was embarrassing. I was a D's and barely passed. But I'm certainly not that person now. And I remember my mom sitting through telling me about parent-teacher conferences. The teachers are like, he aces the test, he just doesn't do his homework. And so one of the things for me, I part from what people consider typical Republican, typical right. When some of those new education standards were coming out, I forget what they called the program. In particular, there was math that I saw a great YouTube video that talked about how this different math.
Khan Academy?
Well, not Khan Academy. It was like a systematic program. I forget what it was called. It caused a lot of controversy and got the right wing all worked up, but they're notorious for that. But it was the math. We're talking about, using dots or being able to explain it, but your math ain't right. And I can appreciate that, because I would get blasted for not showing the work, but I'm like, well, it's right here. I see what's going on, kind of thing. But as far as this ACT, SAT, I figure universities are smart enough to figure it out.
Yeah. So you talk a lot about sort of the degraded crime and public safety situation in Portland and drugs and so forth. Measure 110. Did you, to both of you, did you vote for it? Would you again? What's working? What's not? Why don't we start with you?
I did not appreciate Measure 110 the way it came down because it was very clear to me that the Drug Policy Alliance was trying to work more so on the decriminalization of drugs and again, small amounts of drugs. I get that, and I know as a person of color, I know so many people of color who went to prison for small amounts of drugs, and that was inequitable, it was unfair, it was a horrible thing to have happen. That's not what happens anymore, but even small amount of drugs that someone gets caught with could be the bottom that they need to get into treatment. It could be. You never know. It could be the bottom that they need when child welfare is involved and someone takes their kids away. So we don't have that anymore. Now, the way Measure 110 went through its process, it passed. Okay, it passed by the will of the people of the state of Oregon. So I can't fix that part. But we can then pass legislation that actually tries to set things up in a way that makes sense and then tries to put things into place. Did we finish it all and do a great job on it? Maybe, we're getting there. But did that implementation of resources, finally, putting resources actually into addiction treatment, that is moving, finally. It's taking a very, very long time to get it to happen, and we were all over, DAS and OHA to make it happen. Move this money, move it now. And it took a lot to make that happen. But it is happening. And the fact that we are actually putting resources in a place that we had not put them in the past, significantly, that is something amazing. Now, do we need more? Yes. We just actually finished the inventory. That's another thing I'm very proud of. While the bill that we moved to actually request the inventory for the Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission's strategic plan was sort of supposed to go in partnership with it, but it didn't. But we got the inventory. The bill didn't make it, but it got into a budget note. So the inventory is there. They just finished that at the end of September. It shows the massive deficit that we are in as a state of Oregon in terms of resources and treatment options,
Yeah, aren't we like
personnel.
49?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're 49.
And we have the highest rate. Did I just read we have the absolute highest rate of
Yes,
drug abuse in the nation?
yes,
Per capita?
yes. It's because, again, significant disinvestment, unfortunately. And let me just say, one of my very first bills in my second year, 2018, was to put a date on the Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission's requirement to get that strategic plan out, because that commission had been in existence for 9 years prior to that and had not submitted one damn report. And so my bill actually required them to put a date on it. Like, you will have this done by this date. And they did.
And that was when?
That was, the requirement was done in 2019. So it required them by the end of 2019 to have a strategic plan in place, and they have
And you
it.
need a bill for that.
Well, because the original bill that developed the commission just said annually. They didn't say exactly when or anything, and so my requirement was, you will do it now. And so we made that happen, and then we continued to put more, things in place to try to say, okay, here's the strategic plan. What do we need now? What are we missing here in the state of Oregon? So now the inventory is done. Now we know what we're missing. Now we need to move forward. And unfortunately, Measure 110 just went wham on top of that and kind of messed up my role, because I had a plan for how we were going to start rolling this stuff out and really bringing in the resources to do it. Measure 110 happened and started laying resources down, which is, again, still a great thing, still addressing the inventory, but not in a strategic way as I would have liked it.
Interesting. Okay.
So this, I'm very, you brought the laws that would be, this one actually I would put at the top of the list for myself. I was infuriated when I come to understand what the language of this measure meant. And even watching the recent governor debate, was it a week ago or so, seeing Ms. Kotek saying, well, this Measure 110, we just need to get the monies right and get this figured out. I honestly, so when I moved to Oregon, I was under I registered the Libertarian Party, and there's some weirdness going on there, and okay, whatever. I've actually been a Democrat for a short while. This party affiliation is just, arbitrary anyways. I am very much a strong supporter of decriminalizing drugs. If you know anything about Portugal, look it up. Right now, though, they've kind of hit a period of time where they're having some weirdness trying to deal with it. It's been 20, 30 years or something that they decriminalized everything. And again, this is one of those things, when this shocks me, even with what she said and the governor had said, or the prospective governor had said, this is not decriminalization. Real decriminalization, we did it here with marijuana. I like to call this Measure 110 a quarter-assed idea, because it's not even a half-assed idea. Well, it is. We legalized the use, but we failed to address manufacture, sales, and distribution. And we literally gave the worst people in the world, the drug cartels, a free empire to run rampant through here to dump this poison into the streets, and nobody knows what the hell they're getting. I got a close friend that had an issue with, ecstasy, Molly, one of those. Ended up neurointensive care and such, and this is all part of it. These are low level, and people trust the marijuana. I understand now that they're even finding fentanyl-laced marijuana on the streets is something I've heard. You know, so that's the thing where it just infuriates me. It's such a common sense thing, and nobody picked up on that, and nobody's addressing that. And in this, you know, as much as I want decriminalization, we voted in this horrendous substance abuse problem, and whatever we got to do to get on the other side, now we're going to beat people, you know, and have to figure out an enforcement mechanism when we systematically, literally, legislatively facilitated this.
Nope.
So I just want to be clear, I'll let you respond. Are you saying we created a market for these cartels by letting people have a certain amount?
Yeah, it's a no-brainer.
So they got this, now they've got this market where it's okay to have this stuff.
How can people not see it that way? I mean, seriously, honestly, how can you not see it that way? Because at least before, you know, you can run up the chain with law enforcement, and we put so many laws, you know, making it difficult to even engage people these days. That's one of the, you know, trying to engage people. And I mean, and the police have been stripped down. I mean, what are you really going to do? You can't start at the bottom and work your way up in many traditional respects to figure out where the drugs are coming from. We created a destination for people wherever from across the country.
What do you think?
So you said legislatively. We did not create this legislatively. This was an initiative petition. It was on our measures in the entire state of Oregon. The legislature did not move this. So you need to be very clear about
Well, the
that.
people can vote on the people created this piece of. I mean, technically, and I do get, and there's a parsing hairs going
No.
through. Well,
It's
and
not
I will
parsing
say
hairs.
the
I'm sorry,
legislators
it's
did not, and I will, yeah, and granted, the legislators did not say, okay, we're
It wasn't
doing this.
preferred.
Correct,
It wasn't
and
preferred,
she's
but it's on the books.
absolutely right on that.
Yeah. So does that change? I mean, it sounds like you're a little closer on this issue than I expected, because you
Well, let me
definitely
just-
sound like you're worried that there's not enough enforcement now with 110.
There is not enough enforcement,
Yeah.
but I would beg you to try to figure out how you would actually get the cartels to sign up for a licensure to do it.
You
To
don't.
actually-
You get
I
the
mean,
people
but
that
no,
are
that's
willing
what
to
you-
make money off it, like we did the marijuana. I mean, I know it's a crazy idea, but you know, it's like I said, and you are in the parsing of hairs. You're absolutely correct. The legislators did not put this in place, but again, there's an adults in the room factor of where, to me, it was such a common sense thing. And as far as I know, I didn't hear any voices putting that piece out, saying you're making a train wreck. And to me, this was so obvious. And again, I'm a huge advocate of decriminalization. To me, dealing with this, it's figure out whatever the process is to repeal this, and then we got to be gentle in trying to get the enforcement situation under control and deal with it, because we the voters, put this in place, or go whole-fledged, look at a full-on Portugal-style decriminalization of everything.
And
Yeah.
if you repeal it, then that removes the resource for the existing drug and alcohol programs that are trying to actually work on it right now. That removes that resource. That's what the repeal would do. That is not a functional thing to do. Once you finally get some resources into dealing with the addiction problem we have in the state, which was 49th before the pandemic, before Measure 110, and was first before the pandemic and before Measure 110. These are existing issues.
It wasn't the electorate. The electorate passed this because they were frustrated.
They were frustrated with it.
That law enforcement wasn't solving is my understanding.
Well, and they were frustrated with the fact that you can't get into a treatment program when you're ready. The parents were sitting there with children that were, you know, dealing with an addiction, and there's no place to call because nothing existed that would help support their kids when they were trying to, you know, get them into treatment. That's why
Could you have
the
done that?
frustrated
You
people.
could have gotten more treatment with less decriminalization, right? It sounds like-
I did not write that measure, that's for
Right,
sure. So
okay.
yes, I would have done it differently. But I think that people felt like, the people who put that thing together felt like that was the piece that they wanted to have that would make it work. But I don't know that I necessarily agree with it
Yeah.
that way. Because again, the response is once you get ticketed for that small amount of drugs. And right now, most of the time, there's not a whole lot of ticketing going on at all. Only if it's related to another crime, especially here in the metro. Now, because I have the numbers on that bad boy.
What are they?
They're low.
So this is what I wanted, yeah, so the ticketing is low.
Yes.
We're not ticketing people for possession, right?
Right. Not a
and
lot,
then
no.
and then when we ticket somebody, and Lucas probably knows this more than I do. Good thing we
It's
have our crime reporter here.
It's $100 civil fine.
And then
you get the number
Yeah.
to Lines for Life to call and actually go through a.
It's Lines for Life?
Well, it goes through
something
Lines
like
for
that.
Life.
Yeah, I
it goes
actually
through
know
the
my buddy
process.
runs that, by the way. Just
Yes.
putting this together. But anyway, so then the drop off is both. There's 2 points where it's not working. There's not enough ticketing, and then people aren't dialing the number for help. Is that right?
Right, because it's a
'Cause there's
$100
no-
civil fine. It's just,
Because it's not worth it.
Well,
Or-
because again, it's not the hammer that you need,
Okay.
right?
Who's going to come after them? Our police are too busy dealing with people that are bleeding.
Yeah.
We're 1.2 cops per 1,000 people in the city. You got to triage what's going on in our community right now. And unfortunately, people laid out on the side of the street dealing with this stuff, I mean, that's not a priority. The people having folks break into their homes, getting accosted in the streets, the record homicide. I mean, we're aiming for a 3rd year in a row of record homicide here. So, yeah, I mean, this thing is just a mess, and it just stuns me. Again, to me, part of the reason why I'm here in the first place is, again, the adults in the room factor. Like, to me, this was such a no-brainer, and I'm not going to claim to be the brightest guy in the world. This was such a no-brainer that this train wreck was coming, and the adults in the room are leaders like this. I would like to have seen them be, look, this is not good.
Yeah.
The government they often forget, legislators at all levels, that there's a will on the other side of things. Oh, well, we'll do this and the $100 fine. But what if those people don't want to do it? And so on. I mean, that's where just so many problems happen in government and legislation.
Okay.
Forgetting.
Remind you that it is not the legislature that did that.
Yeah.
So just, you're conflating things,
Okay.
and that's not appropriate.
Let's do this because we're getting down to time. I can talk forever. I'm half Sicilian, but because we can't think of everything.
Sure.
Would you each like to ask the other a question that maybe we've missed?
I don't know. I don't have a whole lot to ask. To me, it's look at the record and look at the state of where we are as a city and in the city. We got 20 years of one-party rule with 4 years of unilateral decision-making to do anything that they wanted. And there's a layer of, accommodation for COVID, but a lot of the stuff was in place well beforehand. I mean, I just say these are the results we have. And I think every one of our legislators, regardless, even myself, et cetera, should be challenged. I'm sitting in a seat that no Republican has run in 18 years. 18, a full generation has grown up being legal to vote before seeing a choice and before.
Is that right? There's not been a Republican?
I imagine. I don't know that.
There's a neighboring one that's been 12 years. And that's, I think, one of the problems with this is, pushing these issues and such.
So a question on that, and then we'll wrap up. You're service in the military?
Yes, sir.
Beyond that, have you been involved in kind of civic service in the city at all?
Lightly, and very lightly. About a year and a half ago, I got involved with the local Republican Party, and the local one is just a mess. But as far as the civic stuff around here, no, I haven't.
But you think you want to jump right in with?
Got to start somewhere. I mean, to me, a major piece of this is people should have options. I understand that it's not an easy thing to necessarily jump into being a legislator and such, but that's when you reach out, you find mentors and talk to people and so on. And it's a 2-year stint. And part of it too is, I think, with the problems we've had, I think people, at least at a minimum, want to look for things that take us in a different direction, because we are in a very solid direction, and there's no denying from head to toe one party. And then even here in Portland, we've got some dynamics going on trying to shift over the city council and the county. And guess what? We've got a state legislature that when they don't like what local communities have done, they've stuck their fingers in to prevent changes if they didn't approve of that. They've
But what do you
I'm
think
sorry.
of? What do you
Yeah,
think
what are you
of?
referring to?
what was it, the Newburgh schools? They local community got together, did their thing to fire a superintendent, and the state legislature turned around and made new rules saying, well, we don't like that, you can't do that now.
Yeah.
Like they had community activism, they did their thing, the local people had their voices, and that's one of the things. I mean, even regardless, I mean, power should be at the lowest level possible, and then here it was, something that took place they didn't like.
That was the
Boom.
superintendent though that banned like pride flags and.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not necessarily agreeing or disagreeing with the gentleman, with what they do or don't want, but there's a degree of communities should have ownership and right to shape themselves.
Okay.
And to shape their areas. And even the police stuff here, we have police stuff happening, and the legislature started like, okay, well, here's what your police can and can't do when the riots were going on 2 years ago.
Okay, you kind of give us a wrap up there, so
Sure.
I'll let Representative Sanchez kind of do the same. If there's anything you want to address there, or just leave us with a parting.
Well, I was going to ask a question. But
Oh, okay.
I'll-
Well, then do that as well. That's still on the table.
Actually, I was going to originally was going to ask you why a billboard, but we'll hold that one.
Wait, you got a billboard? What?
Yeah.
Billboard. But my real question for you is, do you understand, or are you clear about the foundation of the legislative process in terms of the House, the Senate, and the governor, and where that structure came from?
I mean, what do you mean in what respect? Like in history in general? Or?
Yeah. Where did the structure of our governance process, where did that structure come from?
I mean, for me, I would point to Founding Fathers' Constitution. I mean, that this was
Any idea where they got that?
It was a whole mix of ideas from all over. There was
Nope.
Oh yeah, there was a lot that came into play off it.
No, there was
It
not.
sounds like you have an answer in mind.
Yeah.
The government structure that we have and exists today came from the Six Nations Iroquois Confederacy and the Great Law of Peace, and it was taken by Benjamin Franklin, who observed that structure and said, if a bunch of savages can do it, why can't we?
Did they have like a bicameral? I mean, was it how
It was
close
tribes.
was
It was tribes. The big brothers and the little brothers, and then the head chief. That's the way it worked. And that's a structure that has existed for 1,000 years. So.
I was going to say the Magna Carta or something.
No.
but I didn't.
No, and let me just say, I think it's important to understand that kind of thing, to recognize that this should be about communication, because people were representing their people. Their individual members were representing on those seats, those big brother and little brother seats, because the communities brought them forth and said, we want you to represent us, we want you to speak for us. And they did it because people were thinking about everyone, not just about themselves, or not just about their one tribe or another, but they were thinking about all of the tribes and all of the work that they needed to do to succeed as a nation, as the Six Nations.
Sometimes I wonder about our Big Brother house.
All right, we have one final fun question.
Go ahead. Yeah, fun question. I told you the hardest one, now the
already
easy one.
over time. Okay, so the question is, tomorrow's the end of the world for whatever reason, and
Which might be, given what's going on in Ukraine. Go ahead.
and you have one food that you get to choose to eat as your last meal. One food. What would that food be?
You said that with such.
I don't know.
Florida. That was really good.
I've been prepped. Okay.
Cheesecake.
Yeah. Okay, there we go.
And they would have it not bother my stomach. It would be
You don't have to worry about
I
that.
don't have to worry about it, yeah.
Tim?
There's one meal in my life that always stuck out for some reason. So I was on ship. We pulled into Bahrain. We'd been on ship for several weeks at that point, which is a little atypical. And I have no idea what it was, what this place was, and there was just some sort of a curry thing with these different kind of chips. And there was just, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. There was just, I wish I could do it. There was just something magical about that meal and unique in the flavor, and like.
Was it kind of Middle Eastern?
It was local. It was
Oh, it was local.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, okay.
I'm big on
This
it.
isn't- okay.
Yeah, for me, traveling was always like dive
Yeah.
into the local scene of whatever, and I have no idea what it was. And I do often think, like, man, if I could go back in time and
Get that.
and have that, and yeah.
After all those days weeks on a ship, I can see it.
Yeah, I'm sure that was part of it.
Yeah.
Ship food,
Yeah.
and I think we were actually in the field, so living on
Yeah.
MREs and all that for a bit of time.
Oh.
Like, yeah, it was an amazing.
Crazy.
thing.
What would you say? Just make conversation. Friday afternoon. Come on. Just
I got called.
give us something.
Oh God. No, it would be spaghetti and meatballs actually.
Would it be?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
I can see
I
that.
don't know.
Yeah.
Is it boring? Is that
No, it's
boring
fine.
answer?
No, it's good. That's a good one. Yeah.
What's your answer?
I think it would be like, you know, like a bowl, like a whole bunch of Captain Crunch cereal with ice cream and a piece of cheesecake on
Oh,
top.
yeah,
I mean, just go nuts!
that's-
Like, you know, I mean, like, anyway.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. Thank you all for the
Thank you. That was
dialogue.
a great
I always learn so
conversation.
much. And